listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. Today is January 26th, 2025, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I am joined today, as always, by my co-host Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine Sunday?
Spencer, good morning to you. I'm doing well. We're thawing out a bit here in my neck of the woods. We're in the deep freeze for a while this week.
We're still in the deep freeze here.
Condolences to you. Hopefully you get a little relief from that. But yeah, it's been pretty brutal here, which has just made everything kind of a chore, man. I don't want to do anything when I'm in the deep freeze. I want to get under a blanket and get some carbs and hibernate. That's what I want to do.
I can relate.
Yeah. So that's but we're coming out of that a bit, and So that's nice. The sun's out. That feels good. So here we are. We got another morning record going, yep. And I just wanted to say at the top of the show, I appreciate everybody reaching out to us via various channels to offer suggestions about like catch-up gear in War Within. There are a lot of options, and actually maybe there's like too many different channels that it gets a bit confusing. But I do want to say like none of them address the main pain point that like the level 70 gear sucks. It's not the level 80 gear that's the problem. There's plenty of options for that, but there is this weird disconnect where if you want to start playing War Within and you didn't play the pre-expansion event, that your character stinks and is super weak unless you play Dragonflight content that was released late in the expansion's life.
Yep.
And if you don't want to do that and you want to play War Within, it's just weird. We need a vendor that has some greens that are equivalent to the item level that the pre-expansion event gave back in July, August, or like crafted blues or something that would, quickly get you to, nothing too high, but maybe like low 400s or something instead of like the 250 or whatever that you end up with if you just play the baseline Dragonfly stuff. So I know it's confusing, and we kind of have brought it up several times. And I mean, dude, there is like once you get 80, there's plenty of awesome ways to catch up. Siren Isle, Undercoin, all that stuff. Yes, 100%. The problem is for the players who find themselves kind of stuck at early Dragonflight 70. You don't really. I mean, maybe there's something that we are overlooking, but
that's why we mentioned it. We mentioned it a few times because we're like, hey, community, if we're missing something, let us know. Right. But as far as I can tell, as far as professions go, they don't cover it as far as that catch up goes at all. They fill some slots, but not all of them. Greens are selling for an exorbitant price because any green that happens to drop will drop based off your level, which means that the only greens that exist for between 70 and 80 are ones that people have gotten through suffering through leveling 70 to 80 if they were doing something and try to sell them in the auction house. And they sell for like 8 to 10K gold, which is a lot. And they do sell. Like I've sold greens for 4,000 gold on the auction house that were like level 73 and 74 because people I know are in the same situation going, hey, I'm just trying to like finish the first delve quest and I've just hit this barrier and can't get past it, right? And now I understand that you can go into time walking, especially right now. It's a great way to level and level all the way to 80 before doing anything else and then get all the catch-up gear before doing anything else. And that's great. And for people who have multiple characters that this is their alt, it's much less of an issue. But if it's your first character and you want to level up experiencing the campaign and you stop playing partway through Dragonflight, you are in a particular situation, and there's more than a few people that are in that situation. It's just it's created a weird place, and I'm with you. Like 440 or 450 eye level gear off a vendor would be wonderful to sort of just kick people into a spot, because the difference is there's a 200 and something item level difference.
The item level inflation in Dragonflight was massive.
Yeah,
because they added basically an entire separate rank, essentially, the way they spaced everything out. So yeah, it's just it's a weird kind of gulf, and that's what we've kind of highlighted. So yeah, if anybody has good options for level 70 gear up, that's what we're looking for. The max level, but the problem is it's just awkward. Like, yeah, you can queue time walking, you can level up super fast, get to max level, and then get that gear via however you want to get it. but then playing through the entire level up campaign while you're max level and you have max level stuff to do, it's awkward. Like I've done stuff like that in the past, not like with new content, obviously, but like on a tune or whatever. It doesn't feel good to do that kind of level up questing at max level.
No,
so
it feels like you are like it's a waste of time. I should be doing the max level things. I shouldn't be going through the campaign now that I'm max level.
Yeah.
Like it feels weird. So I that's why I say like that. It shouldn't be that the correct way to play through this expansion, if you're someone who stopped partway through Dragonflight, is to go into Time Walking or some alternative and level to max level and then hop into the actual campaign and do the campaign. So it's just there's just a gap. We've just identified a gap, and that's all that is, and that's all we're asking for feedback on. So, but I do appreciate, as you said, all the engagement around. Hey, here's great ways to catch up characters.
Plenty of great suggestions for level 80s. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of different methods, and it's pretty smooth. It's actually awesome. But the problem is the game also expects you to play through the level up campaign.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about that later in the episode too, because to play the new content, you have to play the old content. All right. With that, let's chat a little bit about what we did this past week in World of Warcraft. We had our Mythic Reclear, which we did reclear, which felt really good to actually get through all of it. We did get to Queen on Sunday. We just couldn't pull it together to kill Queen on Sunday. And then so we had to come back on Monday, and it took us about an hour or so on Monday to get it. So we're close to that one night clear. We're really close to that one night clear, which will feel really good. Hopefully tonight is the night we get a one night clear, and then Monday just becomes a free day, and we just start consistently doing that. That'll be really nice. And the fact that we're going to have a nice, prolonged break here before the next chunk of content will mean that it allows people to really focus on the other stuff they want to focus on. For me, that's been, I did Mythic Plus this week. I did 4 Mythic Plus dungeons on my main. There's very little that I need for Mythic Plus from my vault. I think I'd probably take like one ring until I get the Ovanax ring. There's a ring that I'd probably use. There's a helm I might use. But in general, there's not a lot out of there that's left for me for Mythic Plus. So I ran the 4 just because I thought it would be fun to run the 4, and it's a great week to run the 4. I really like the affix this week, so that's a big thing. I actually got into a debate with the people I was running Mythic Plus with about affixes, and they were like, I really don't like this one because if the ad can spawn at a really inconvenient time. And I was like, comparatively to the other ones, this is a great one. Just think about that. And they're like, well, but I kind of like the orbs that you can kind of like blow up and get out of the way with, knockbacks and stuff. And I'm like, I hear you, but that buff is crap compared to this buff.
It's usually alive for like 2 global cooldowns. So the time can't be that inconvenient in my opinion.
Exactly. That's and I think the biggest thing that they were running into is a lot of the people that I do keys with just do a lot of keys in general, and so they do a lot of bug keys, and they just run into people not targeting the ad. And you're like, well, yeah, the ad sucks if you leave it alive. If you leave it alive long enough to reduce the damage everything else takes by 30 or 40%, it's a really bad thing. Like you need to deal with it, but that shouldn't be happening. And if you have a monk or an evoker, this thing should be dying really fast. So let's hopefully see that happen for some folks. So yeah, it was an interesting debate to have, but it was good to do some Mythic Plus. Got that done. Still working on professions and catching professions up. I did a lot of mining this week on my engineer because I found out when I leveled up engineering that miners will get scrap parts from mining easy nodes. The easy mine nodes give you scrap parts, and scrap parts are what are used for discovering new recipes, which is the only way to get recipes is through invention, where you invent towards a prototype or you invent towards notes, and then you use those notes to, which I think is really cool, to choose from 3 different options of something you want to learn. So you basically, when you collect 15 notes and you use them, you get here's 3 different choices pop up on your screen, and it tells you, like, this is a low-end leatherworking tool, and this is a, high-end mining tool, and this is and I went tools, so I see tools a lot more than anything else. And this is a prototype for the resurrection device that will bring people back to life after a raid wipe. And you're like, oh, okay, I can choose which one I want to pick. And you pick one, and then you use another 15 notes, and hey, another 3 choices pop up, and you can pick from those, and another 3 choices, and you just keep doing that until you learn all the recipes. So I probably have enough scrap now after spending a lot of time mining and trying to catch up mining on my rogue to be able to learn probably everything that's out there, but I'm holding off because I like to use the invent, which just gives you basically a recipe, or at least close to enough notes to a recipe every time you use it, and you get 2 skill points, and I'm trying to get to 100 skill points. So I know I'm going to be using it anyways because that's the main way to get towards 100. So I figure I can hold off and save some of these parts that you can use for creating stuff. But I've really enjoyed engineering. There's some really neat stuff in engineering that I did not know was around this expansion. Like there's fun toys that you just get. So I got a defective like nuclear destruction device, which is hilarious. I got
I guess it's good that it's defective.
It's defective.
Yeah. You don't want it to be don't want it to be effective. Being defective is better.
There's all the fishing and cooking and all that kind of stuff as well that's there. As far as profession tools go, there's all of the goggles and helms and bracers that you can make. There's just, I don't know, there's just a lot of really neat creative ideas inside engineering that make me, I've always liked the profession from a outside observer, but to have someone who actually is max level with an engineer who's doing fun engineer things, that is new to me. So I'm enjoying that experience so far. So I certainly would recommend people trying out engineering if they're looking to, but definitely take mining as your secondary because it's going to help you out big time with everything that you're doing with it. I will say, it is the most expensive profession for buying secondary things. The fact that I have to spend so much gold on like, hey, I just need to buy buckets so I can make gears, and the buckets just come off a vendor and I can't make them in any way, shape, or form is weird. And the buckets are like 9 gold a piece. And you're like, dude, I need like 1,000 of these. That's a lot of gold. Like, let's be clear. And then it's not just those. You also have to buy like some of the base wire parts and some of the base other parts off vendors. I know that alchemy, if you want to make cauldrons, you have to buy a cauldron and it's like 30k to buy a cauldron. But you keep the cauldron, you can keep reusing it. You don't have to like, so you buy like 1 or 2 and then they're just yours for the entire expansion. You don't have to spend gold on it again, which I like. And I know for blacksmithing, there's a few things you have to buy as well, but nothing in comparison to engineering. So I was like, okay, this is going to be a expansion long, expensive profession when it comes to buying stuff off vendors. So that was good to know. I also, I discovered a mount I could make for engineering, and Auctionator, there was an add-on I used that lets me sort of scan the auction house for prices on certain things and purchase things in bulk packages sometimes, which is great. And I use it pretty frequently just for judging. The biggest thing I use it for is for judging profit off of stuff I can make. So often with a profession, I'll be like, based off of what the materials cost on the auction house and what this finished product is selling for, am I going to make money if I choose to make one of these? Which is great for enchanting is where I use it the most, because you're like, hey, is this something that's worthwhile me making to try and sell on the auction house and use up some of my concentration to make like a high-end enchant of this? Or is no one going to buy this and it's not worth anything? Or the market's flooded with them, right? Well, Auctionator told me this mount costs 2 million gold to make. And I was like, okay, that's going to sit on the shelf for a little bit until I figure this out.
Like, there was something similar in BFA, right? There was a mount that you needed a blacksmithing piece and an engineering piece to combine. And for most of the expansion, it was just so prohibitively expensive to put those things together and make the mount. It's like, unless you were a real mount collector, it was just like, okay, this is cool that I know how to make this part, but I'm not going to be doing that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to put in, and I think it's important to have something that sort of is attractive to all different types of players. And there's certainly players out there where 2 million gold is not a lot of gold to them. I don't think they're an average player. I think they're an outlier, but that is one of those, those things that exist. So having one thing in the game that's good for those people, I'm fine with that. That doesn't bother me at all if that's what they want to do. It's just it was an interesting thing, and it's a mount that has 2 other versions of it in the game. It's the one that you get out of doing the whatchamacallit, where you have the waves of robots that come at you.
Awakening the Machine.
Awakening the Machine. That's
yeah. It's a reskin
of that. It's a reskin of that. So it's not like it's like, oh, this is super unique and crazy, and you're never gonna. It's just a reskin. So that's cool too. But yeah, so I did that. Worked on engineering. Worked on my other professions through the week. And yeah, outside of raid, there wasn't a whole lot else going on. So I basically did. I didn't do any more PTR. I did do PTR last week before raid, because we had an hour before raid. Actually, sorry, I didn't talk about that. And it was buggy as all get out. Oh my goodness. We got in. First boss was pretty easy. Went on to the Godzilla versus King Kong boss, which FYI is really cool looking. They do clash at a time where they slam into each other and there's huge effects that happen. Like there's some really cool stuff with them, but they were way overtuned. And I don't know, like, here's the tricky part, right? It was normal, the new raid, but they put us in like 610 item level gear. And you're like, okay, that's like not even heroic previous raid tier to face off against this. So I couldn't tell if it was actually overtuned or if we were just so undertuned that it was not where it should be tuning wise. But there was definitely something off in that fight. We went on and did the trash collector boss, which is probably going to be one of my favorite bosses of this this raid tier. I can already feel where throughout the fight, the boss assigns people to be on top of a rolling magnet that then rolls around the room, collecting up garbage into these giant piles of garbage that they roll around like a log roller until they have a large enough size, and then they roll it into a giant bomb that's going to explode, and it diffuses the bomb by smothering it in garbage. And I'm like, I'm down. This is fun. I got the roll around thing 4 times in a row. It was so good.
So it's like a Katamari boss.
Yeah.
If you ever played any of the Katamari games, that's pretty cool. That's a cool idea for especially for a raid like this. It seems like it fits pretty well.
Yeah, it definitely fits well. There is, and I will caution people because I don't want to like spoiler anything about this raid, but let's just say that there's like vehicle physics that do interact with your character. That's all I'm going to say. So, you know, if you were to walk into a street and be hit by a car, which hopefully never happens to you, let's just say something similar would happen inside of this raid. You know, just one of those things. Yeah. Keep that in mind.
Nice.
It's a thing. Yeah, so that was pretty much my week. It was just profession stuff, Mythic Plus, doing raid and prep for raid, and then debrief from raid. So, yeah. How about you?
Yeah, pretty quiet week for me around WoW stuff. I mean, like I've been mentioning the last couple of weeks, like we're really kind of dialing it down here for the end of season. We got in and raided on Tuesday. We had bizarre and very severe server issues for the first hour or so. People's tunes were just getting stuck. Like they were logged in, they were online, but they couldn't interact with anything inside the raid zone, and they couldn't log out. And then they would like force quit the client and log in a different tune, and then their tune would still be stuck, even though their account was logged in elsewhere.
So we had a similar issue weeks ago when we were actually still doing Queen Prog. We had one guy standing on Queen's platform who on his screen was standing about 100 yards below Queen's platform, but on our screen was standing on Queen's platform, couldn't interact with anything, couldn't move, couldn't be killed. So it happened mid-pull, which meant that we were just all locked in combat as Queen just like repeated phase 1, doing wave after wave after wave after wave of slimes, never stopping for like 10 minutes, 12 minutes, until finally, I guess, the force quit finally dumped the person offline.
Yeah, something finally timed out, I guess.
And then we could get back in, but then we couldn't get them out of the raid group for a chunk of time. So it wasted like 20 minutes of raid. It was pretty surprising. And that happened a second time to the same person, like this past week. Like it happened on like Sunday, where the same person had the same issue, but it was before a pull. So they identified, hey, I can't move or do anything before a pull. And so we all just had to wait until they timed out and we could actually get them out of the raid and get someone else in, et cetera, et cetera. It was just like, what is going on? So yeah, there is something going on with that.
Yeah, it was, I mean, this was like a half dozen people, maybe more. It was a big chunk of the raid. And it was like, some people were having some weird issues with Olgrax, you know, the first boss, like, oh, it felt a bit sluggish or whatever. And then several people, like after the fight, you know, after you kill the boss and the floor drops out, they just like didn't drop out. They were just upstairs and they couldn't get downstairs, and we're like, uh-oh. So, I mean, this was something we were struggling with for a big chunk of the night. I was like, you know, removing tunes from the raid so that they would get ported out and then grab somebody's halt and bring them in. Somehow we still managed to get through our typical Tuesday schedule these days of, you know, heroic skip, so 1, 2, 7, 8, and then mythic 1 through 4. I don't know how we did that in 2 hours with all the issues we had, but I guess 18% buff for the zone helps. Maxed out rings help. People in like super high end gear certainly helps, you know, for people who are playing their mains. So, you know, I mean, the raid is essentially our farm stuff is just trivial at this point. I mean, Seacron can be, you know, he can get kind of messy if people are not paying attention to what they're doing. You got people that don't have the experience in the fight and they're not careful enough with their positioning. Rashidon, sometimes people get a little greedy or they get a little unlucky and then you get too far behind. But like for the most part, I mean, you know, we're breezing through most of the farm bosses, even with mistakes or whatever, like a suboptimal comp. with all the upgrades that we have and with the zone buff and all that, it's just, it's just kind of academic. We're just there to hang out, really. I did some keys this week. I got 4 in, and I'm done. Like, we're not going to raid tonight. Wednesday we did go back for 45 minutes, half hour, and clean up those middle 4 bosses. Brought the monk in for that, so that's cool to get the monk some currency and some vault choices and stuff for something I'd be doing anyway. And then some warrior keys. The void emissary. It's just like, again, I've been running a lot with a Mistweaver buddy, and so you got some all kinds of options for these types of affixes, and also like classes with, like, obviously I'm playing a warrior, so like I just start dumping executes into it. I play a lot with a ret pally, whatever. I mean, the thing just doesn't live long enough for anything to matter. And the buff is awesome. So keys were feeling pretty good this week, but again, like, we don't have any goals. We're not pushing. We're not doing 12s and above. We're not trying to push to 3K. We're just clearing just to clear, and maybe something cool comes out of vault and we hang out for a couple hours and have a nice time. That's really all there is to it, which is fine. I don't think that's an invalid reason to like play the game. In fact, I think maybe that's the most important reason of all, really, is to like enjoy the company and have that kind of social environment to play in. But it is, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's feeling a bit like a chore. Like, there's just other stuff I'd rather be doing with my time, but I do have that kind of responsibility to the group, which is fun. Like, I'm enjoying myself. It's just like, I am so checked out of this season. And along those lines, I opened the Great Vault on Tuesday reset, and what do I find but a Mythtrack Sareki Zealot's Insignia, which is the neck from Seekron, which is super well statted, and it has the special effect on it that when you receive healing, you restore mana to the person that healed you, and you both get a verse proc, which is awesome. It's such a cool effect, and it's a really nice thing to have. And it was really the last thing that I was like, it would be so cool to have that before this is over. And now it's like, okay, well, that's done. I guess like there's some side grades that could be cool. Like there's some boots that maybe might be slightly better statted. Like I could use a slightly better shield, but 639 equipped with my main stuff on. I got like really good trinkets, Mythtrack, and I got the special cloak and neck Mythtrack maxed out of the raid. Yeah, it's a great feeling. I need like one more gem socket, so I guess I can't go wrong with this week's vault, because no matter what happens, I'll at least have the last thing I need for sure. So it's awesome. And also like it was a big haste upgrade replacing that neck, so I took a big haste downgrade going to the circlet, and so this kind of evens it out a bit. I'm back around that 35% haste on gear, which feels a lot better to play prot with, so I'm happy about it. It's just like, what am I going to use this for? We're not doing prog anymore, and I'm not pushing anything. So it just makes the stuff that was already easy that much easier. That's a good thing, but it's just we're in the super late stages here. I did go out and finish up Siren Isle, obviously, for the final week. Got flying unlocked out there. Got the final upgrade on the ring and the toy that comes with it and stuff. That was cool that they threw a toy in there.
That's something I wanted to mention, because you mentioned the ring earlier. Is for folks who haven't been doing Siren Isle consistently, or whatever it is going on, this past week was the week where if you are fully caught up, obviously you need to catch up otherwise, but you can catch up in one day if you're looking to do that. You don't have to catch up over weeks of time, where you've now unlocked flying. You do the dirigible flight test is what you do, and once you've landed that, you then unlock flying on Siren's Isle, so you can fly around and do all the tasks there, which make them substantially easier. It's also the last ring upgrade week, so you should have that 658, I think is where it ended for that ring eye level, so that ring should be pushed to that. We shouldn't be seeing any more upgrades to the ring or big Siren Isle unlocks after this past week, so just keep that in mind. Yep. That content is now sort of like in its farm stage, if you will. It has been completed.
There's no other addition. There's nothing else that's going to happen out there. So if you haven't done it, then you can go do the whole thing. You should, like, if you are like a progression type player of any variety, if you play in-game PvE, you should go get this maxed out before season 2. You will use the ring probably until at least like about mid-season levels of gearing, or maybe even later, depending on RNG and other various tuning. So definitely worth going to get. There really was like Siren Isle. It was fine. I think a lot of players really dislike it because they wanted something meatier. I liked it because it wasn't really very meaty, and it was just this thing I could go do for half an hour a week, and get some tangible benefit.
And it has tons of rewards. Like there's so many things to purchase out there that I feel like that was the meat. I feel like yes, there wasn't a lot of content meat in the sense of like, hey, yeah, there's new storyline, a new exciting dungeon or something that's happening inside of the situation, but if it is content where if you want the rewards there, you like do the loop on multiple characters, do the loop whatever you want to do it, or just grind the storm or whatever it is to get as much of that iron as you can, because you will need a lot of it to buy all of the rewards, and it's going to take you a while to get there. So like that to me was the meat for those who are interested in it. But it certainly did not have the storyline stuff that maybe more people were looking for. Yeah,
it's that like cosmetic grind is really what what that island is. And I mean, now that you can fly, it's a small space and it's pretty dense. I mean, there's like rares and events and treasures everywhere, and they're always popping up. So I would imagine it's a pretty fast farm if you're flying around. I got all the stuff and then I left, and I don't know, maybe I'll be back some other time. But I did think it was like they set up some cool story beats that maybe will pay off somewhere else, but there really was no capper. It was just like, hey, you've mastered the winds of the Siren Isle. Congratulations, you can fly now and you hear your rings better. Okay, thanks for coming. There was nothing that kind of wrapped up sort of like there's that story of like the exiled Vrykul and everything that ended up on there. Like there's stuff that gets it's set up and you dig into it a bit as you go through the questing, but there's no real payoff. So maybe that'll be at some other point, or maybe farther into the expansion we'll encounter like the people that left there or something, or who knows. But I did think that was a little weird that the end of it was just like, here, fly around and do this little vehicle mini game. And okay, thanks for playing Siren Isle. But like I said, I didn't even, I have to make a confession here. We got the new like Illyria and Khadgar story questing in this patch. I didn't do those yet.
Really? Oh my God.
I didn't do them yet. I just didn't. I haven't bought. Like that's sort of where I'm at with like spinning WoW down. It's like, oh, this doesn't provide any kind of tangible benefit to me, like playing with my raid group and my dungeon buddies. Well, then I'll do it later. So I haven't done it yet. So I
understand.
I'll do it before patch probably. That's what I'm telling myself right now.
I will say that is so far one of the more emotional stories that we've had. And so I was really thrilled with what they did with the most recent installment of all of that. Obviously it revolves around Dalaran and the collapse of Dalaran and what's going to be happening next for the Kirin Tor and everything else. And I really enjoyed what they chose to do. There's still a lot of nostalgia and callback in it. There's a lot of emotion in it. There's a lot of grief and moving on and all like this. It's a really good piece. So certainly check out that storyline if you haven't, because it's certainly a good one. And if you're someone who's played World of Warcraft for a long time, you'll definitely have this like, if you're there for the quest, like you can't do it for completion. You can't be like, I just gotta get this done. You have to be there for, I'm going to read the quest text and check out that, what's happening with characters and have those conversations of before I walk away to go and do the next task, talk to other people that are around me to see what they have to say. Because you will have a really nice nostalgic experience that speaks to what's happening next with that group. So there was a lot of effort you could tell put into that story about what's happening, and I am looking forward to what happens next with that. So yeah, it was good. I'm glad I took the time to do it as a, hey, I will actually want to read all this, as opposed to like, hey, I just want to get this done so it's no longer an exclamation point on my map. Like that's, there's both ways to approach it. That is one where if you were going to approach it that way, I'd be like, no, take the time, find the right mood that you need to be in, whatever it is, to actually do the quest the way you should do the quest. And I think you'll really dig what they unveil and go through with that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And there's character participation. They do have your character choose how to handle something. Now it's probably the same result regardless of how you handle it, but they do have the, hey, here's 3 different ways or 4 different ways to handle something. How would you handle it? Like that is part of it too, which I think is neat too. So yeah, I like that.
Well, I think that reinforces my choice not to have done it yet when I'm not really in the like headspace to want to be doing it. We'll start ticking back up once it's patch time, and so then I'll be a lot more motivated to sit down and actually like invest into doing it properly instead of just trying to click through the quest while I'm doing something else or whatever, or trying to get it done before I don't know, raid starts or whatever. So yeah, that's just kind of where I've landed with .7 really in general. You know, it's just not really doing the big weekly loop. I haven't even really been doing my weeklies because it's like I don't need the fragments or whatever. You know, I don't need anything anymore. So I'm just kind of, I'm there for the team, and we keep that stuff running, and then we're just waiting for patch.
Yeah. All right. With that, let's hop into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, this week is the Classic Time Walking event as part of the Turbulent Timeways going on, which means if you complete 4 of these, you get yourself your Turbulent Timeways buff, increasing experience gains by 30%. And if you happen to complete 5 of these, you get a cache of heroic Nerebar Palace loot during the Turbulent Timeways. So certainly a great way to level up. You can work your way through Deadmine, Zul'Farrak, Dire Maul East, Dire Maul West, Living Strathhome, and Undead Strathhome for some 554 at max level dungeon loot, or you can go to the vendor and buy some 541 high level gear. This is the vendors for this, because it's Classic Time Walking, should be in Stormwind and Orgrimmar for you to actually turn in your quests and buy things from the vendors. I think these are going to be the exact same rewards on the vendors that we saw during the anniversary event. So if you bought up all of that, you probably have most, if not everything, off these vendors, but we can always check to see once this goes live if they added something in, if there's like a amount. It'd be neat to grab like the OG horses that aren't for sale anymore, or OG wolves that aren't for sale anymore, and throw those on these vendors. That would be kind of a cool thing to put in there, or at least one of them. So hopefully they do something like that, because that would be cool. But the outside of that, Turbulent Timeways is going for a few more weeks, so certainly take advantage of that. If you do 5, if you get the buff, the run 4 of these in a row buff 5 times in a row, you'll earn yourself another mount and a feat of strength. So I think this is your last week that you could have skipped, was last week. So I think you have to run for the next 5 weeks in a row for the 4 time walkings to get that done. If you miss this week, I think you're just out of getting that feat of strength. So be sure that you're getting on it if you haven't yet. Because I think that's where we're at.
I think you're right. And this is the first time that we have seen Classic Time Walking outside of the 20th anniversary. So we don't. Yeah, the vendors should be in the main faction capitals. I don't know exactly where, but I'm sure we'll find them. And I would imagine it's all the same stuff that they had. I think the big refresh was with the with .5 with 11.0.5. Yeah. So probably nothing that wasn't on them during the anniversary. But if you missed that or you didn't max it out, it's another shot at that vendor coming back. So. Yeah, I haven't been doing this at all. Like the feat of strength and the mount, it's just not enough for me at this particular moment in time. And like I said, like it's cool to level characters fast, but I have more characters leveled than I can tend to. It's like they're just gonna sit. And I was talking to a friend of the show, Case Lock, about this because he's been blasting tunes through Timeways. I think he's got like 8 of them now or something. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, you know what, dude? I know I should be doing this, and I'm sure I'll live to regret it, but it's just not where I'm at right now. So I haven't done it. But it's a great option, and I think if there's some, if there's any kind of benefit for you as a player from this, it's definitely like it's the best bang for your buck you're going to get in terms of leveling tunes up and stuff. So definitely hop in there if that's what you're trying to do. I think the problem is tying so much of the benefit to like XP gains to a player like me does nothing right now. Well, I don't really care about gaining XP in January 2025.
The heroic cache to me is the other thing. So I like this week my rogue had hit max level, so I now have all my professions covered by max level tunes, so they're all maxed out. So I was like, all right, well, what do I want to actually spend my time doing Timeways on? And I initially was looking at like other characters, and now that I'm thinking of it, I'm like, I said I don't have all the heritage armors, so I could do like one of the heritage races I haven't done yet. I could do that and get that out of the way, because that would be another great one for me to do. There's some horde races I haven't maxed out yet, so I could do that too with some of those, just to sort of, finish off that aspect of it. Those are certainly ways I could go with this. But then in my head, I'm also like, dude, heroic piece of loot. So I just took my evoker and was like, I'm going to just take my evoker through this and get a heroic piece of loot. So I did. So I ran 5 of them. That got the buff. That counted towards it, even though my evoker's max level. And I got a heroic piece of loot out of it. So I was like, all right, that's still worthwhile to me. So that was the double enticement, I think, that works out well with this. Now, someone in your situation who has, 3 or 4 characters that they play and they're all heroic geared or plus, I can see that there's not as much attraction, but
a lot of this is just applies to me personally because of my mania around this game for many years. Like, I have all the heritage armors, and I have a character of like basically every flavor at least level 70, and I have 3 characters that are in full heroic gear this season. So I obviously, like, a lot of people are not in a position like that, but just for me personally, it's like there's just nothing drawing me into this right now. So that's just why I haven't been doing it. If there was I'll tell you what, if there was some kind of like massive badge bonus to badge acquisition or something you could unlock, I would be more interested in it, because they added so much cool new stuff to all the time walking vendors, Or how about this?
That would be neat.
How about streak protection on the Infinite Time Reaver that I still do not have since
I saw someone get that this past week. I saw someone actually have it drop this past week. I was like, dude, congrats.
It still exists. Sometimes I wonder, like, did it end up in a bag on an alt that I never play?
I don't know, maybe.
And that's why the game never drops it for me, because I have it somewhere and I'm just unaware of it. I don't think that's the case, but the mount's been out for like 11 and a half years.
In its first iteration, when in Culling a Strathhome, I remember getting that mount off of, who was the demon that was in there? Oh man, I have to try and remember. But the last boss of Culling a Strath, it might have been Mal'Ganis who was in there.
Fight at the end,
but and literally it dropped, and I got it, and I learned it, and I was like, that's crazy. And then like to then it's one of those mounts where I got it then, being like, oh yeah, this is great. So people are going to get this through this event. And then you start to realize just how rare it is. And it's been 12 years and people are still farming for it. You're like, oh man, I got really lucky in that early year.
Like I remember somebody I used to play with back then was so upset because she didn't get it after like her first 5 dungeons. And she like spent the whole weekend like grinding time walking dungeons to get it or something.
Yeah.
I think she did get it, but she was like mad about how long it took. And it's like, I've done literally hundreds of time walking dungeons since then, and I've never seen it. So that's a really weird chase for me. And hey, maybe that's why I should be doing Turbulent Timeways. It's just more chances at that. But
I like
some streak protection on that would certainly be appreciated.
I liked your badge idea. I think a really cool thing would be, as part of the Turbulent Timeways buff, they should add a percentage increase to the amount of time walking badges you earn.
Yeah, that'd be
based
cool,
off the buff. Like, so as like have it stack up to 4 for experience, and then the 5th one you do gives you like 25 or 50% more time walking badges from that are rewarded for completing time walking dungeons. So you just get like this large. So it's like, hey, if you want to keep going, if you're leveling characters or whatever, and you want to keep going, or if you're farming that mount, you can get 50% more badges every single dungeon that you run for just continuously running dungeons while that buff is up. I think that would be a cool way to do it too.
Yeah, I mean, they added like tens of thousands of badges worth of new stuff on these vendors. So like, I would that would be a thing that would maybe influence me to do it, even if I didn't want to level anybody.
Right. Yeah, I get that entirely. Okay. The weekly event is the Titan Disc Fragments. So you're going to get your Titan Disc Fragments again. Remember, this is a 3-week rotation. So the previous one that you got, you could still complete, and the one before that you could still complete, but it's going to go away the next week. So right now we're working on Titan Disc Fragments coming back around, which means the world boss, which is the aggregation of horrors, the big Scarden Abomination in the Reen Deeps. If you can kill the world boss while not in a raid group, which means if you can get down there on Tuesday or Wednesday and are sort of poking around, seeing if there's a group that's trying to beat them, you can get that boss killed, which will get you 50 of these fragments. Unfortunately, you won't get that if you're inside a raid for whatever reason. They haven't resolved that yet, but that's a great way to get some fragments up front. If you're someone who has a new alt and you want to go and run some delves, last week was the delve event that was going on, and so there's some delve quest stuff that's still lingering around in your quest log if you haven't done them, then that's another great way to get some of these Titan Disc Fragments as well. If you're trying to complete the weekly dungeon quest for reputation, because you can get 1 renown off of just doing that quest, which is a great way to max out the Weaver reputations that are down there of the Ashkahet different Weaver reputations. you can actually basically choose which one you're going to help for the week as the one that gives you the actual increase to your gathering speed, and then use this quest to get renown with the other two who you are not favoring that week because you want the gathering bonus to cap those ones out. So that's a great way to do that. That'll also help you get some Titan Disc fragments as well if you're doing some dungeon stuff. So lots of little ways to get it, but there's some ways to complete it that are faster than others. Treasures, rares also drop them too, so you can get them from all sorts of stuff when it comes to Titan Disc fragments. And then
it's another good source of them. It's just like doing whatever you're doing on Siren Isle.
Oh yeah.
A lot of stuff out there grants the fragments, and so if you go out there to do fill the bar, right, you're probably gonna kill some rares, you're probably gonna do some of the excavation events and all that, and you'll get a pretty fair chunk of them from doing that too. So kind of that deal of like, do your lap at reset, pick up all the quests, and then do whatever it is you're gonna do. But adding Siren Isle into the mix, I think. Is another really nice source of them. It has been for me the last couple times it rolled around. I'm like, oh geez, I'm already like halfway done with this, and I didn't even start thinking about it yet. So don't leave that out of the equation, I guess, if you're trying to do your big weekly lap.
And that just comes from also just they're farming iron, which is nice to do. So certainly worthwhile. All right, PvP brawl is Gravity Lapse. This is one of the oldest brawls in the game. This is Eye of the Storm, except every minute gravity will turn off. And you'll float around, and then you'll eventually, follow the ground. So just be sure you don't float around off of the meteor that you're fighting on, because then you'll fall to your death. So that's in space. You just keep falling. It's pretty terrible. So you definitely don't want to do that. But yes, this is one of the oldest brawls. It's I think could use a refresh. I would say it's a little weird they haven't done that in so long, but it's probably just not even on the radar. But yeah, Gravity Lapse is this week. If you're someone who wants to do the brawl and do the something different quest, get yourself some Marks of Honor, some Conquest, and some Honor. That is an option for you as well. Okay, Mythic Plus affixes for the week. We have Devour, which is players are periodically affected by Let's frame this the way we wanted to frame it. Players are periodically afflicted with a healing quota while in combat, is what we settled on. And that you need to heal through this quota or dispel the players who have this debuff in order to gain a stacking health increase and crit damage buff. If you fail to heal or dispel the quota off of your friendlies, then enemies will heal for 10% of their maximum hit points per player who is not dispelled or healed inside that situation, healed through the quota. Yeah, because this isn't a healing absorb, which is what everyone sort of frames it as, because it doesn't actually absorb healing. When you're healing someone, they'll still receive the healing before this thing is completed. It just tracks the amount of healing that person is receiving, and they have to receive X amount of healing for it to go away, for it to actually to end and fall off of them as a debuff, or you can just dispel them. So that's one of those two things. I will caution, this is the heavy caution for this week. If you are choosing to dispel this, if that is your decision, be sure as a healer you are paying attention to what other things you normally have to dispel inside of a dungeon. If you are working your way through the maze inside Mists of Tyrannosaith, and you dispel someone, and then they get the debuff that kills them if it's not dispelled off them, and your dispel is on cooldown, you have messed up. This is a problem. So most healers these days choose to try and heal through all of this. It is work. You do have to sort of plan around what you're going to do cooldown wise to heal through it. It is tricky to line it up with when there's actually damage that is happening on characters where you would want to be using those cooldowns. So it is a very different week to heal these Mythic Plus dungeons, both from a dispelling perspective about where you're going to be dispelling people, and from a healing perspective of, hey, do I have the cooldowns or resources to heal through this debuff on all these people, and while still having what I need for the next big AoE thing that's happening? Dawnbreaker is a great example, where there's a lot of pulls in there where I am like, okay, I don't want to use Convoke, or I don't want to use these big cooldowns until we hit this particular trash pack, which we're going to hit in less than a minute. So I know it won't be off cooldown, so I can't use it yet. So I have to hold that and not use it regardless of what's happening. And if this affix comes out in the middle of that, you're then in that situation of okay, how am I finding the healing I need to get this thing off of players before we then get to that boss? Or what am I going to do differently at that boss where I can actually use Convoke now? And so this also requires other people in your group to be paying a lot more attention. So if you have another Dispeller in your group, if you have like a Shadow Priest who can do a Mass Dispel, that's great this week. I think Poison Cleansing Totem works for this too. So that certainly helps as well. If you are someone who can do some sort of large heal on yourself, like Lay on Hands, whatever it is, that's another great way to clear it off of people. So keep that in mind as well. But yeah, it's a different week for people. I would say pay a little bit more attention to your personals. If you're someone who has like an Iron Bark or a Bark Skin or I guess a Shield Wall would be a tank thing, but like any kind of damage reduction for yourself, this is a great week for paying attention to those abilities a little bit closer, because your healer might be using their cooldowns a little bit out of beat or out of rhythm with where they normally use them, which means you might need to use those things a little bit more advantageously for this week. So yeah,
that's a good call. There's this is an affix that when it first came out, dude, we were like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Because we're low gear, low throughput, weren't used to it yet. And honestly, the downside of this is probably the worst of all the downsides. Like if stuff starts healing itself, man,
you'd be
in a really bad spot.
It's crazy.
It's really bad when you don't fully clear this. But as we've scaled up and geared up and just skilled up with the content, it's become a lot easier to deal with. It is a healer affix, but it's not exclusively a healer affix, and you can't expect your healer to do this for you and for you to succeed. You need to participate as well. This is a week where I spec into Bitter Immunity, which gives me, at least every other time it pops up, I can just shut off my debuff, which is great. So Warriors, don't forget that exists. If you're hopping into Keystones this week, it definitely takes some pressure off. It just gives you that option to do it. Also, the fact that it's not an absorb in and of itself, right? Like it's not that the debuff needs to receive healing. It's that the character needs to receive healing. It's good and bad. It's good for healers, but it's bad for certain types of like self-heal effects that non-healers might have.
Health stones.
Yeah, like for perfect example, like you can't use it if you're full health. I can't use impending victory rush if I'm at full health, which a lot of times between external healing, my defensives, my absorbs, and in my gear, it's like, I can't actually weave one in. But just be aware of that. Like just because you hit the button, it might not have gone off. So maybe wait another beat and see if you can squeeze in some extra self healing just to help out your healer a bit more. Yeah, I think overall the tuning landed fine. It's just a different approach, like you kind of mentioned, that you have to take this week with it. It requires a little bit more teamwork and cooperation than maybe some of the other affixes do, but I think the tuning is pretty fair. I haven't run it. The last few times it's been around, it hasn't been like, oh man, how are we going to clear this thing? Oh, the boss just healed a lot. Oh, here we go. You know what I mean? Like that, the first time it rolled around, it was kind of like that, but we've sort of graduated since then. So
yeah,
still one of the ones that I'd rather see in the rotation than the ones that put all kinds of stuff in the field of play, and then you have to react to, but a lot of times it involves movement or whatever. There's not even a plate for this. This is the least noisy one in terms of the battlefield itself. I mean, obviously everybody gets a debuff on them on a frame or whatever, but there's nothing in the field of play to interact with. So, use all your abilities wisely. Take a good look at your overall kit, and if you have a way to get this off of yourself, then grab it and be ready to help healers out.
Yeah. All right, the micro holiday for the Call of the Scarab was this past week, and the update we have is that the Alliance won in North America. So you will have Alliance flags flying over the gates of Anchorage for the next year, because the Alliance won this Call of the Scarab event. So there were people out there doing it, apparently, because enough people participated to actually have a winner. So that's a thing. So yep, that my holiday's wrapped up.
The Alliance got at least 1 point in NA. We know that.
Yep.
And so we were talking about this a little bit pre-show. Like we were trying to figure out the all-time record in NA, and it's like it doesn't appear to be kept anywhere. So this is how little this matters. There's not even like a record of who's won each year since 2017.
Yeah, it was weird. Like not on WoWhead, not on WoWWiki, nowhere. Like there's no no one's kept track.
Yeah, any of the usual suspects. We tried to look and just see if we could find the history, and even in like comment threads or just, yeah.
We have the most accurate history in our show that you would have to go back and listen to the episodes. Yeah.
Go back and listen to late January episodes, and maybe we talked about the previous week and who won. Yep. Yeah, so there you go. Call the Scarab. I mean, it's I guess whenever you're out in Silithus and near AQ this year, enjoy those Alliance banners. I probably won't be out there at all, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing. It's always been a cool thing, but it's always fallen for me. There's only 1 or 2 years where I actually participated. It's always fallen for me in a period of time where I'm like, there's too much else going on. I'm just not. There's just too much to do in the game, so I don't spend my time doing that. But I'm glad some people find the time, and I'm glad they were Alliance. I'm glad they won. All right, upcoming Lunar Festival is going to start up on Tuesday. So Tuesday, you are going to be able to go out and honor the Elders of Azeroth to receive coins of Ancestry, which you can spend on toys and pets and transmog. And there's also the from 2024, the Lunar Festival armor you can buy for the Winding Slitherdrake, which is 50k gold from Valadar Starsong at the Lunar Festival vendors. So if that's something you really want to do, you can get it. And there's also the Elders that exist inside of the Dragon Isles. So if you're looking to get a few more coins of Ancestry, you can go around there. You can celebrate in Moonglade and defeat the holiday boss Omen. That's something you're looking to do as well. And then we don't know what's new, whether there's going to be new things. But if you want to go all the way back to Shadowlands, you can go to the Venthyr Covenant and you can do your Ember Court event to get the special Elder for the Lunar Festival, which gets you the bonus rep for the week, if that's something you're looking to do as well. So that's happening. So yeah, check out Lunar Fest starting Tuesday. As Jason said last week, this is another great one for people who do like the Pacifist and things like that as far as experience gain goes, because you get a lot of experience gain for coins of Ancestry. And all you have to do basically is just go to different flight paths, speak with an Elder, and then get on the next flight path and just go around that way. And you can essentially get a lot of experience on characters passively without having to really engage in anything. So if that's something you want to do, that's absolutely an option as well.
Yeah, this is like a pretty low impact holiday, in my opinion. You know, there's stuff to do. I mean, yeah, you can go hang out in Moonglade and you can fight Omen, you know. That's about it, right? Like for the most, other than that, it's pretty much just visiting the Elders and collecting the coins. There's not really, I don't know. Is there even like one-time questing around it? I can't remember anymore, but this isn't one of those higher impact holidays, even though it lasts a long time. It's not like, you know, Hallow's End or something where there's this big suite of dailies to do in all these different places, which is, I think, fine. I think it's okay to not every holiday should be like that. There is some cool stuff from this, though. I love the dragon costumes. They were a great addition a few years back. So if you don't have those, I would say put them on your list. That's definitely a fun thing to do with like raid downtime or whatever. If you're waiting for somebody, you know, who's relogging or, you know, getting dumped out of the game because their tune breaks, you could break out your dragon costumes or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, pacifist leveling. I don't know if people, I don't hear about anybody doing that kind of stuff anymore, but Lunar Fest was always like a big one on the calendar for that. Cause yeah, you could, and they added a bunch of new NPCs in 2023 in Dragon Isles. I'm going to guess that there's going to be new ones in Kaz Algar either this year or next year if we're still in War Within by then. So yeah, we'll have more details on it next week, and then you'll still have at least like a full week plus on it at that point. So we'll see what's new, if there's any kind of rework to it or whatever.
Yeah,
but definitely get your dragon costume. That's my advice.
This used to be one of those things where back in my day, we would farm up the moonstones that you could then use to put down, because there wasn't raid markers back in the day. There's no raid markers, right? So we would use moonstones to talk inside raid and set up for fights. So you'd farm up a whole bunch of them during this event, and then you'd go into, you know, Blackwing Lair and go, okay, we're going to put down beams of light to try and talk about where stuff was happening and what was going to happen with things as raid markers using moonstones, which was, I think, hilarious. That, you know, that then became eventually the floating icon that moved up and down inside of the, you know, the glowy circle that we have now for raid markers. So I was very pleased when that all happened back then. But that's what this event used to be for me back in Lunar Festival days. Okay, hot fixes for the week. They have fixed an achievement. The Trove Tracker will no longer require obtaining all 8 glowing arcane trunk treasures in Nazjatar. Players can now obtain the achievement by locating 4 of them. So for someone who's been trying to get that is now easier to do. They fixed a whole bunch of stuff in Plunderstorm, with Celestial Barrage in particular, where they reduced its radius and travel speed and a bunch of other things. So if you're someone who's Plunderstorming, that was something they hotfixed this week that affected, that fell into the live game notes. In the Siren Isle, they fixed an issue where the conditions needed to find the Inky Snapdragon treat were too low. So it should now be easier to find on the Siren Isle. So if you're trying to get all the different treats, you can find those easier. So that's great. As well as just, in general, making that quest chain easier. So last thing here, I guess, they fixed an issue that prevented flying and some of the other unlocked Siren Isle abilities from being account-wide when unlocked. So those are account-wide things. If you're someone who likes to fly, you have now unlocked flying on one character. It is warband-wide. So all your characters should be able to fly now. As far as Siren Isle stuff, if you've actually done that. So that's great too for folks.
Yeah, this is one of those hot fixes that makes me wonder, like, they frame it as like a bug, but was this like a design intent? Because people were not happy, as you can imagine, when they finished the weekly quest on a toon and then other toons couldn't fly out there.
Yeah.
Now, there is something weird about sort of the way this progression works, how you get sort of this zone-wide bonus from completing each of the weekly quests. And so maybe that had something to do with it. It seemed intentional. It seemed like that they had designed it that way, and pivoted on it because of the complaints. And maybe that's not the case, but just as a seasoned veteran of this game, that's sort of the impression that I got. Is like, it's supposed to be like your character is progressing through this and getting this cool item and getting this, these cool benefits from using the item in this location. And then you repeat that process on other characters. I think there's basically nothing that the player base is willing to accept as being character specific at this point. So I don't think they should have done it that way. Like, I don't really have a problem with it as a player, I guess, especially because my alts are really alts. Like, they're not at parity with my main, and I don't approach them the same way. So like, I, as a player, don't care, but yeah, I think this shouldn't have needed to be hot fixed, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, those unlocks should have just come in account wide from week 1, as soon as you started unlocking stuff out there. So
yeah, it's
cool. It was only a couple days where, I guess what really stinks is if you are somebody who, you brought number 2 out there and you're like, oh, I can't fly. Oh, I got to do the quest. Oh, and especially if you were behind on the quests, and then you do them all and then you unlock it. And then like 2 days later, they're like, yeah, by the way, this is account wide now. If you fell into that category, then you got the worst of both worlds there. I only did this on one toon and I didn't take any of my alts out there this week. So, I'll be able to just benefit from the changes. But if you took a character and then redid all the questing because you weren't getting the buffs, then that's like pretty much worst case scenario, I guess. But going forward, it's, all that stuff. I guess that means like all of the different like weekly bonuses are they don't specify. I guess it says some of the other ones. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if they said which ones were account wide once unlocked, but hey, whatever. I guess if you need something out there, it doesn't really take that long to get it. So you probably have whatever you're going to get account wide at this point. And if you need something else, then go do the exclamation points.
Yeah. All right. Plunderstorm Trios is now live. So you can now play with 2 other your friends. That's now up and running this past week. As well as you enter the hub of Goblin Ingenuity in Undermine. The Undermine zone overview is now live. So this is the whole giant Undermine overview post. We're not going to go through the entire post, but we will highlight the things that we think are important for you all to know and pay attention to, because it is going to be our new hub going forward. And there's been a lot of like data mining and people playing on PTR and people posting things here and there. There's an apartment that people can get that I know a lot of folks are excited about. It's not actual player housing. It's just kind of like faux player housing, but it's a step in that direction and it's a nod towards their plan for it in the future. So that's been something that's been very popularized in social media, is you get your own apartment that's there. The important things to highlight here is the journey to Undermine is going to require level 80 and the completion of the Khazalgar leveling campaign. So this circles us all the way back to the top of the show with our conversation of, hey, the leveling experience for folks who haven't gone through the leveling experience before is rough without proper catch-up gear, depending on where you actually started in the entire campaign. And going back and doing the leveling campaign after you've already done it once on a character. Well, sorry, just going back and doing the leveling campaign at level 80 is not super fun to do. And folks who may have, let's say, bypassed a lot of the campaign by time walking their way on their first character through to level 80, and then looking at this and going, I'd rather just do Mythic Plus, and dove into that system instead, and dove into raiding instead, and never really finished the campaign, aren't going to be able to travel to Undermine without doing it. So this is your timer, this is your clock, all right? If you have not done this, unless they change something going forward, you need to finish the Khazalgar leveling campaign all the way through in order to be able to go to the new content. Now, do I think this is a good thing? I struggle with that one. I think not being able to go to the new content until you've done the 6+ hour leveling campaign is probably not a great way to go with this sort of setup. It certainly dictates that the proper way to level your character to 80 is by doing the leveling campaign, because then you're effectively leveling yourself to 80 at the same time as you're completing this other objective. And so both objectives wrap up at the same time, or similarly, closely along the same time, so that you're then able to go to the new and latest content, which is a problem. So I'm hesitant about saying I think this is a bad, I'm just straight up, I think it's a bad requirement to have for the new content. I think it makes sense that, hey, you're not going to know what's going on in Undermine. If you just walk into Undermine, you skip the whole leveling campaign. I feel like there's ways of informing people of that. Like they arrive in Undermine, and when you go to pick up your first quest, there's that red quest text that they can put in, that they put in for when you want to skip campaign things or whatever, that will just straight up tell you, hey, a lot of this is tied to the leveling campaign. You may not fully understand what's happening here without completing the leveling campaign. And people who don't care and just want to do the new content and just don't read quest text and skip through it have the option to skip through that. I think is not necessarily a bad thing to have it set up that way. And that's not how it's set up. It's set up in a way of going, hey, you want to play with your buddies? Okay, be sure you set aside a Saturday or a Sunday or whatever your weekend is and just do the actual leveling campaign, because otherwise you won't be able to. So I think that's unfortunate for the way this is all laid out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is just bad. I get that they want people to have experienced the story and everything, but I really don't think it should be a requirement. There's just so many different ways to approach playing WoW. If there's some tech reason why you have to be phased to the end of the campaign, then I sort of get that, but maybe that's, maybe the burden there needs to be on resolving the tech issue instead of making players play through this questing.
Well, they have campaign skips already, so you'd assume that right. the hurdle of the tech skip would be, hey, are you sure you want to skip ahead to the Undermine campaign? This will essentially, bypass you learning anything about the previous campaign. You won't be able to complete that once you've done this on this character. And then the person has to make the decision right. of, if I ever want to do this, I have to go on a different character and go through the Khazalgar leveling, right? That'd be the decision they have to make. I mean, it could be, I don't know, but I just feel like we know how cyclical kind of a big chunk of the WoW audience is, right? We see it just from doing this show for so long, and sort of the sort of waves of discussion and engagement that we have with listeners around when WoW's hot and when it's cooled off. And it's going to get really, really hot leading up to an expansion, and then the immediate wake of an expansion, then it's going to cool off, and then it's going to get hot again when the first big patch comes out. Not as hot as the expansion, but it's going to tick back up. You're going to have a lot of people coming back who maybe they didn't finish the Khazalgar leveling campaign, and they want to play Undermine because it's cool. They want to get their car, and they want to do the new stuff, and they want to play with their friends who are still playing or whatever. It's well, go do the story questing that you didn't care about enough the first time to finish, right? I think it's a weird requirement, but I guess it's good they highlighted it. Man, that would have been a bad day one surprise, wouldn't it? Oh my God, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's definitely worth. I wanted to make sure we publicized it on the show today. Make sure that that if that's what your plan is, that you make sure you get your questing done. I mean, that's also why, knowing that they do this kind of stuff, that's why whenever like a new expansion comes out and people who maybe are not as invested players, or they've been out for a long time and they want to give it a whirl, they ask me like, what should I do? It's like, do literally every quest you can find. Do all the main story questing. You should do every quest everywhere if you can, but like definitely, and now the game designates the campaign quest for you. Make sure you do all of those before you think about doing anything else. For me, that's kind of how I approach the game anyway. Usually, like when a new expansion comes out, I want to play through that whole story and have all that stuff unlocked and get whatever rep and other things along the way come with it. That's always my approach anyway. But also I feel like the game is really structured around you doing that. Like it's kind of expected, even if it's not really explicitly stated that way. Like without doing it, you just don't have access to, big chunks of the game. So it's got to be done. But I think when there's a patch roll, it's an opportunity to go, okay, you don't have to have played the previous patch. Like we're playing this patch now.
Yeah. No. Okay, the next thing we want to highlight from this post is that the cartels in Undermine are always looking for temporary contractors for quick gigs lasting 1 week with no restrictions on who you choose to ally with, though your experience in Undermine changes based on which cartel you choose. Whichever cartel you decide to align with, whichever cartel you decide to align with is up to you, and Katie Racketring in the Incontinental Hotel can help you decide. When you earn reputation with any of the cartels on a new open world renown track, you'll gain access to unique goods, including an explosive new achievement title and a rocket mount, and the top skimmer special, for what I assume is the rocket mount's name, for all your hard work. So there's then a list of all of the different, the Bilgewater and Blackwater and Steamweedle and Ventureco of the different ones. And I presume this is going to be very similar to the Weavers, where you have, hey, this one, has these advantages for you for the week. This one has those advantages for you for the week, et cetera, et cetera. And so the important thing to note is this is a weekly thing. This is a quick contract gigs that last 1 week. So this is what you're going to be doing, is signing up with that cartel for a week to support them. And you'll get benefits based off of which one you sign up with and support for that week. So keep that in mind.
Seems basically like a 1-to-1 with Severed Strands right now, right? Like what we have in Azj-Kahet, except you have at least one additional choice, and the post teases like a fifth one that they don't lay out. So maybe you have to like reach some level before it unlocks, or maybe there's like a moment as the campaign story unfolds that it unlocks or whatever. But so yeah, it probably, in the ancient times, it used to be there'd be a faction and an expansion. You had to pick one or the other, right? And if you picked it, you would get rep with them, and you'd get hated with the other faction or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't really do stuff like that anymore. And this is obviously more choices than with Azj-Kahet, but my thought would be you should be able to max all of these out if you do your weeklies every week, and just keep picking different ones to rep up with. So
yeah,
that's cool, because there's usually a lot of cool unlocks and stuff that come along with these types of systems. So just keep that in mind. It seems like there's probably some profession specific stuff you might want to target first, the way they kind of lay out and describe each of the different cartels. So I guess keep that in mind. There might be one that you want to target and max that out first before you start collecting the whole set.
Yeah.
I gotta look a bit more into what the benefits are. Like I said, I haven't played PTR, so I haven't really looked at too much data mining stuff. So I don't know where I'm starting yet, but that's going to be my approach, right? I'm going to figure out like, okay, professions are the number one thing, I guess, on my mind here. If there's a benefit to that when I'm choosing which one to go in with first.
Yeah. So Katie Racketring will be one of those ones you sort of go, okay, Katie, what do we got? What do these people do? And they'll describe all the benefits. Assume you'll look at the trees that you'll get for, how that sort of pans out benefit wise for you and where you're spending those points. I'm assuming I'll still be gathering my Severed Strands buff to get my 30% increased gathering. But if this then has
if they shut that off somehow,
it's going to feel really bad. If this then has like a perception increase, you get higher quality goods more regularly, or finesse, so you get more goods. Like that would be an interesting thing to be looking for inside of these different groups, right? I can definitely see like Venture Co. being like, oh yeah, you team up with us, you get finesse. You're going to get, this like 500 finesse bonus or something every week and across your account. It'll be like, oh, okay, well that's that's the one I take every week, so that when I'm out gathering, I just get substantially more stuff on a regular basis. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. Okay. The other thing they mentioned in this post is Operation Floodgate, which is the dungeon that's there. I'm just going to read the boss names because they're great. You have Big Mama, which is actually M.O.M.A. So this is the, we don't know what Mama stands for yet. I assume inside the Dungeon Journal will probably tell you, but it's a prototype mech named Big Mama. So keep that in mind. You then face the Demolition Duo, and then you're up against Swamp Face, which is just like a big hibernating beast, apparently, named Swamp Face, which sounds like something that a goblin would call something that had a swamp face. And then you have Giesel Gigazap, which is a very goblin-y name. So you have lots to look forward to with those 4 bosses in this new dungeon when it rolls out for folks to check out. All right, next post is Delves in Season 2. This is feedback post for Delves in Season 2. This is a big post.
You want to just dip in with a little disclaimer here, because we talked about, we were spitballing about Delve Season 2 on the show a bit last week, and some listeners brought to our attention, like, hey, they actually like outlined a bunch of this stuff in blue text, but it was in the feedback post for Delves in Season 2.
Yes. Which
I was not following. I'm not PTR testing, like I've mentioned, and like I wouldn't be PTR testing Delves, I don't think. So there is some juicy stuff in here in plain blue text about what to expect when Season 2 rolls up. So we're going to cover that, and I really wish this had been a separate post. We got that big post about raid renown last week, for example, that highlighted what do you need to know about Season 2. Like, that was a great post. This is really good info. I just wish it hadn't been published this way. I feel like the changes about the Season 2 reward structure and rollover from Season 1 and 2 deserve their own post, in my opinion. Yeah, so that's why we missed them.
Yeah, this really buries the lead. Like, you're talking about, like, okay, you have a feedback on Delve Season 2 and essentially a full-on blog post of a reply. Kyvax comes in as like, greeting Delvers, and like goes into this entire like post about what's going to happen with Season 2 Delves, and it's not a blog post. It is a reply to essentially a post within a Delve feedback thread, which is weird to see. But yes, it certainly deserved to be its own post, so that's why it sort of fell off our radar. It wasn't on our radar for that. But the things we want to highlight from this, because it's big, this is like a 3-page post, so just keep that in mind. The things we want to highlight from this is that with Bountiful Delve rotation changes, there's new logic that will rotate through Delves from the original launch until all of them have had some time in the sun as Bountiful Delves return on new zones. And so this means that we're less likely to see the same Delves being bountiful day after day after day, and the one Delve that you want to do that achievement or get that thing from never getting bountiful, or only getting bountiful like once a week or once every couple of weeks, which has been happening currently. So they're changing that logic, which is good. So they're opening up the hood and making that work differently.
Yeah, to me this is like a double-edged sword, maybe, or I don't know. It's more variety, and more variety is generally good, but there are some Delves I really don't want to do, man. So like the logic that made it so that, okay, in Ringing Deeps, for example, like Waterworks is not the one I want to do. I want to do the other one. Its name escapes me as we're talking here, but that one would, it was, you had a kind of that coin flip, and it would tend to be predictable that way. So I kind of like that. It kind of makes sense to have all of the all the Delves kind of rotate through more naturally as bountiful, and have that. You have all these different Delves for a reason, and I can understand why the developers don't want me just spamming the same couple Delves over and over again for my weeklies. But yeah, so we'll see. And now, granted, they're going to like mix up the Delves and stuff, so maybe the ones that I have disliked will be a bit better or whatever. I mean, you can do a lot in these interior spaces, right? So maybe we'll see some new variants that aren't as annoying. I really don't like the Delves that carry this candle or totem through this space, and it gets smaller as you move, and then you get a new one. Like, those didn't land for me. I like some of the other ones a lot better. So hopefully we'll see some more variety with that stuff.
That's also Delve scenarios, right? So it's not just which ones are bountiful, but it's also the Delve scenarios. So it's making sure that, those scenarios get some time in the sun as well. Because, yeah, it's a little weird going like, I've just been waiting for a week and a half for this particular one to be up, and it coincides with essentially me having time off to be able to do it is the tricky thing. And so having them rotate a bit more often, I think will be great. Okay, Season 2 changes. Bran will keep his level going from Season 1 to Season 2. And Bran's level cap will increase to 80 in Season 2. Your coffer key balance will be reset. So you're going to lose all your coffer keys, all right? Keys cannot be carried from Season 1 to Season 2. There is no mention in here of any kind of conversion rate to gold or anything like that that's happening. They're just saying straight up, use your coffer keys because they're going away. And I had basically guessed that that was going to be the case, most likely, and that is the case. I will say they do not mention anywhere in this feedback post Undercoin. It's not mentioned anywhere. We have no idea what's happening with Undercoin. So...
Right. We sort of have to, I guess, conclude from that your Undercoin will just carry over. But I guess, we're still a ways out from patch, so anything could change. We could get some different information. Coffer key to Undercoin conversion would certainly be nice.
That would be really nice. I would love that.
Even if it's not like a super favorable conversion rate, I'm sitting on, I don't even know what my main is sitting on in terms of keys.
200 to 1. Yeah.
Even if it's worse than that, it'd still be free Undercoin, right? Like, yeah. I still have collected a bunch of keys on my main that I never ran. I stopped doing delves on the main, I don't know, months ago, because she just graduated out of the whole reward system. But you do weekly stuff, and the keys just kind of pile up. So, yeah, conversion to Undercoin would be awesome. I would take whatever I could get versus just having them deleted. Saying. Yeah. But like Undercoin would make sense, and there's plenty of stuff on, there's not like, I guess there's not like relevant power really on the Undercoin vendors. So it's not like it would be some situation where they'd be skewing it for people who had a whole bunch of keys. Like, they get some huge advantage heading into the season. Like, the best thing you could buy with them to set yourself up from Season 2 would be the keys that you get from Sir Finley. Right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what, like 3,000 Undercoin total if you're all the way up the track. So it's not like it would be, that's not that much Undercoin to collect in advance of the season roll either. So, if all that stuff is the case, I don't think it would be some huge imbalance where it's like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to be collecting keys because look at all this Undercoin. Like, I think we could weather that as a player base if some people got some nice bonuses from having a bunch of useless keys at the outset of Season 2.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's a huge, massive advantage with that. I also feel like Delve Gear, if it remains in its current state where you get heroic loot from completing high enough tier delves, that has nothing to do with bountifuls, which means the keys don't factor into that at all. And if you're talking about getting normal, raid loot out of doing bountiful delves, I feel like that's not going to affect a huge amount of the player base, because mythic raid gear currently is going to be better than normal raid gear in the new content. So just keep that in mind, item level wise. So it's not as though we're going to have players who are, Team Liquid's going to take advantage of having the delves access, blah, blah, like that's not going to be a thing. So I wouldn't stress too much over that, but we'll see what happens with it, what they choose to do. All right. They still want a repeatable source of Gilded Crest to come from Mythic Plus and raids, but also want delves to start to reward Gilded Crest at a high level for players who want to push. So tier 11 Bountiful Delves will reward Gilded Crest up to 3 times a week. This will be from separate chests in the Bountiful Delve, so players will not be required to get a key to acquire the Gilded Crest. And they will not change the Great Vault's requirement in Season 2. Tier 8 will be the highest delve to run to get good rewards from the Great Vault. So you need to essentially run 8s to get your heroic reward from delves, if you're trying to do that. But if you run 11s, you'll get Gilded Crests, and you can get that up to 3 times a week. So we don't know necessarily how many Gilded Crests that will be, and how much of a contribution that will be towards the cap. I will say, if this was the case in Season 1, I would have not been as far behind going into the actual time when I started earning Gilded Crests, because it took me a week to get geared enough to run Mythic Plus content that was high enough to have Gilded Crests happen for me, which meant that there were very few people out there who were running content high enough to actually even start earning Gilded Crests. Whereas tier 11 Bountiful Delves are going to be rough, but as long as you take your time, they're doable. So I do feel like this would be a great way for folks to get Gilded Crests in like early season 2 without them having to worry about trying to do high enough Mythic Plus and deal with groups in Mythic Plus. So that is going to be a nice alternative for folks out there as well. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and it should also allow you to, get to the top end of your potential gear, right? Because you have those last 2 ranks on the hero track you need Gildeds for. It's really not possible to get enough Gildeds to do that in season 1, even if you have the discount on another tune. Like, they're just not available enough. So, this might be incentive for me to take like my alts and push higher delves if they feel good to do, because the reward would be nice. It'd be really cool to max that stuff out. That also means extra Mog, right? Once you convert that hero piece into Gilded Crest level, then you get the Mythic Mog. So that is actually a nice little incentive. And I think for people that are really, I know people who are like, delves are kind of, either like the way they're engaging with WoW and WoW endgame, or like they're a serious part of their weekly rotation and diet. Then, this is a nice benefit, I think. I understand why Blizzard came out of the gate kind of conservatively, right? With like, okay, you just really do 8s, and anything above 8s is more for kind of bragging rights or whatever. That makes sense. I think, as they're seeing player behavior, I think they're understanding that it's worthwhile to provide some more incentives and rewards for doing that higher difficulty, and that there's an audience for it. So I think it's cool. I could see myself maybe, doing 11s on the monk to get some nice upgrades and stuff. But I don't know. My approach with alts is more like, I just like having them for some variety here and there. So I might not, but I think it will be, it'll be a great option for people who have been, really heavily engaged with the delve system for sure.
Yeah. I think it will be a benefit regardless for folks, even for the folks who are like, hey, I want to earn some Gilded Crests, but I don't want to have put together a Mythic Plus group, or I don't have time this week, or whatever it is. You can do it on your own schedule a little bit easier with delve. So I'm glad to see that coming in as an option for folks. All right. In season 2, they're also going to increase the chance for you to get a map with each run if you did not find one. We'll also add it so that you can only earn 1 map a week. So you're not going to essentially have people who got 3 maps in a week and it was crazy and that was just, random, and man, did I ever get geared out fast. You're going to have everyone have a chance to get 1 map a week, and that chance will increase with every delve you run, which means you essentially can run delves until you get a map if that's something you want to do. And so you might end up in a situation where you get the map early, you might get it late, but at least you're essentially guaranteed a map because the chance will increase every time you run it. And you'll essentially be in a situation where once you get 1 map, you're not having that, hey, maybe I should run another just in case. Maybe I should run another just in case. That goes away, which I think is probably a wise decision as well. So good change here as well, I think.
For sure. The maps are really important, I think. There's a great reward, right, to get that hero track. If you're doing, top level and end of run delves or whatever in season 1, they've been huge. It's a whole reward track higher than the stuff that normally drops. And yeah, the variance just felt bad. I'm not somebody who didn't get any maps, but a lot of times you would get maps on the wrong character or whatever. Like in the period of time where I was doing the warrior, the monk, and the druid delves weekly, it's like, well, great. All the maps I got this week happen to be on the warrior. I got 2 maps on the warrior and it's 2 vendor pieces, right? Like that's all it turns into. 1 map per character, where you stand, right? And it should be, you should get it a bit easier and more consistently, hopefully they increase the chance enough that you can reliably get one within your first couple delves. What would really feel bad is, it's your last delve of the week, or you thought it was, and then you get your map. That just feels kind of bad. So hopefully it's pretty front loaded. So by like delve number 3, you're pretty much guaranteed to have your map for the week. And then that'll be awesome. Cause that's like, when I think about how I sort of approached my alts that I wanted to play this season, my goal was hero track, top to bottom. And, you get what you get out of the delve, you get what you get out of the map chests, but it's not like I was getting a map every single week on both of the alts. So this pretty much guarantees that you'll get, at least of some kind, you'll get 2 hero track pieces on a character from doing delves for the week, right? Like, I think that's the intention anyway. And hopefully if the maps dropping isn't consistent enough, they'll tweak it. But it seems like if I take that same approach in season 2, I should get essentially like not quite twice the rewards, because I did get some maps, but I definitely wasn't getting a map per character every week. So you don't have that like super high roll top end of like, I got 3 maps this week, dude. Like I got so much gear. Like that's not going to happen, but the consistency I think will be a lot better. It's going to feel good to get that map every single week. Know that you can get it, know that it's coming, get that extra piece of hero gear, week on week on week, all season long. I think that's way better than, hey, maps exist and like maybe you get one, maybe something cool happens, or maybe you don't.
Yeah, maybe you just feel bad because all your friends got maps and you didn't. Yeah, exactly. All right, other updates we're seeing coming in is new curios for Bran. They're looking at sort of widening what they can do with these different curios. I would almost want to see equipment for Bran at some point where you can essentially give him, a different, maybe a set of binoculars or like a grappling hook or like whatever it is, and that affects how your brand behaves as well inside a dungeon. So I like that there's new curios happening. I want, like, by the time we walk out of this expansion, there to be like the delve system, your hero for your delve stuff to be, something that you can do a lot with. I think would be really neat. I'd be fine with this becoming a more complex system over time, and just being sure that when they introduce it, which they currently do, you unlock different stages of things and they sort of they trickle drip in different things for you. I'd be fine if they maintained that, but made the system a lot more broad. I think would be really neat to look at, especially if they think about continuing to do delves going forward, which I certainly think for the next couple expansions, we should see. It is a system like that I think they could definitely maintain. So that would be neat, but good to see more curios come in for that. We're also going to see new affixes coming in, and they're going to essentially offer a increased difficulty, but not to the level where your delve run is like over when you encounter them. As far as like some of these affixes and stuff that you come into, you're not going to go in and go, oh man, it's a XYZ particular, week or delve that I spawned into. I should just leave and come back to this one later or another time or whatever it is, because this affix is terrible. But they are choosing to like have things that like replace normal enemies with more elite enemies and things like that inside of some of these for season 2. So certainly keep in mind there's going to be some spice added to these delves.
I have to admit, I laughed out loud when I read this section. Like, they should offer an increase in difficulty, but not to the level where your delve run is over when you encounter them.
Yeah.
Like is literally in blue text.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Kind of overshot some of those Zekvir mobs in season 1, didn't we? I think it's fine. Like that was the whole problem wasn't the variety or the extra challenge that they introduced as you kind of scaled up through the system. It was they were tuned wrong.
Yeah.
They were just way too hard, and I don't know, say that's sour grapes or a skill issue or whatever. If you want to, you can, I'll take it. But I don't think I'm alone in saying it wasn't a fun mechanic and that people didn't like it. You know, it's one thing to have this kind of thematic thing where it's like, oh, your delve is like being invaded by these minions, or like, that's kind of cool. There's a cool thematic thing to that, and they can add a lot of flavor and variety to something that you're doing so many of, if you're a delves player. But yeah, like, I mean, there were seriously times early on in this expansion where you go into a delve. This was in the period of time where they decided they were going to punish us with delves that first week or whatever it was, where they just cranked everything like to 11. And you just like zone into the delve and, that pair of ads is here, run out and reset it.
Yeah.
Like, we have to get one that doesn't have these things in it, and then we'll proceed. Like, that's not fun. Right. Like that's like, I don't know, like re-rolling in a roguelike until you get like the starter that you want. Like it's just a waste of your time, like it's not interactive and it's not fun. So I'm cool with them, revisiting the concept of having these sort of thematic, like extra trash or affixes or whatever you want to call them, but they got to be in line with tuning. Sure, they should be harder than the standard mobs in there, but they can't just kill you. We have to be able to play against them. So I'm open to it. The weird thing is, I guess like that they didn't really reintroduce this into some of the lower tiers. I mean, I guess the intention is just do this in 9+. So that's okay. A lot of times I feel like with stuff like that, it's better to introduce it lower and just tune it lower and just get people used to the concept. It's sort of, this sort of goes back to like a gripe I have with Mythic raiding really, is like a lot of Mythic raid fights are designed in a way that's interactive and fun, but the tuning is really punishing. But like the heroic version of the fight is a cakewalk that you don't learn anything from and actually is less fun to do. Maybe some of that kind of feeling applies here too, where it's like, well, why only put them in 9+? Put them in lower ranks too, but just make the tuning more favorable and then scale it up just so people can get used to playing around it, fighting against these things or dealing with these different mechanics. I think there could be some value there, but the tuning has to feel good is really the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Tier reset and item level changes. Well, yes, we're moving into season 2, which means that they're going to reset what you have unlocked tier progression wise inside Delves. You're going to go all the way back down to starting at tier 4. You aren't going to be able to start at 8 and get your max reward for your vault, or start at 11 and start earning Gilded Crest right away. You'll have to work your way up to it by completing Delves. And just like you would at the beginning of any season, the difficulty and rewards of 4+ Delves will increase to match the new item level caps for season 2 for normal, heroic, and mythic. So keep that in mind. You're going to get bounced back to tier 4, and things are going to be more difficult because they're going to be assuming you have a certain item level based off of the season 2 caps for those item levels. So expect that to happen. Not too surprising.
Yeah, this is equivalent to like your keystone decaying in the Mythic Plus system, right? It's the same kind of idea. It stinks a little bit because you are going to have to, like, if you're just trying to max out your delve for the week, and I'll bet you if you're coming in at like 640 that you could probably handle tier 8s the first week of the season, but I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it'll be a lot harder than that. We'll see. It gives everybody, I guess, like the same playing field, right? You got to work your way up through the system. So, get to work with it, I guess. And we'll see how it turns out. I really felt like even in horrendous preseason gear that like the first 4 tiers of delves there wasn't really a lot to them for me. So I guess we'll see how this feels when it launches, but makes sense. It's just the process for some players may be a little tedious of unlocking tiers 4 through 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think for a lot of players, the mode really starts at 8. So, we'll see how it goes. But I get what they're doing here. I just think it's going to mean that, well, you got to do like 4 extra delves that you didn't really want to do.
No.
I don't know. Maybe week 1 we go in there and a tier 8 is like mega punishing and we're like, what did we do? What have we done to ourselves? And we got to gear up a little bit more. Cool. Okay. We'll live and learn. I do think there's also some wisdom in just like letting the players make their own mistakes in that regard. Like if you want to just stroll into a tier 8 and get punched, I mean, hey, I don't have a problem with that either, I guess.
Yeah, there's going to be a learning curve too, right? Because we know they're adding in vignettes and treasure powers, which is the next sort of thing they talk about in this, which I expect this to actually be in a blog post. I expect there to be a blog post release that talks about an entirely new system they're adding to delves. They're going to affect players. So they say players will find new vignettes and treasure powers to earn in season 2. The goal with these original powers was that players would modify their runs to go after these when they were spotted. We also wanted to make sure they weren't so powerful that a failed delve run would be blamed on not getting the exact power you wanted. And so this is talking about like when you kill a rare and you open up a treasure chest and that treasure chest has this, now makes it so that when you jump, you can jump a second time. Like that kind of thing was what they're talking about with these. So a successful delve run should still be based on player gear, skill, and your curio loadout. However, season 1 vignettes and treasure powers weren't rewarding enough to risk lives at higher tiers, which I agree. I often skipped those rare spawns to just complete at a higher tier.
Yeah, I almost always did by mid-season. Yeah, dude, I wasn't even wasting my time on them.
Yeah, we're going to push the powers a bit in season 2 a bit more. Powers found in treasures will be shards of curios that were destroyed by Underpin. Players will find shards of the anamorphic relic, arrowhead idol, and now the not so unbreakable iron idol. So we know that anamorphic is one of the most popular ones. That's the one that gives you haste, is one of the big pops of that. Arrowhead is the one that gives you a ton of crit. So these are, if you're going to find shards of these, this is like you get a huge crit bonus for the rest of your run. That's massive. Like if basically running an extra curio would be pretty cool. And I assume it's a slightly downgraded version since it's a broken version or shards of version. But still, that's a big option here. Powers acquired from defeating powerful vignettes will now focus on modifying your brand for the run. So your shield alert. When you fall beneath 50% health, brand will shield you, reducing the damage you take by a massive amount for a short period of time. Or silencing potion. Brand will throw out a healing potion that will also trigger an AoE silence to nearby enemies. This means non-healer brand specs can now have access to some heals, and healer brand will throw out even more healing potions, which is awesome. The heroism canister, where brand can activate a smaller version of Bloodlust at the start of combat with a cooldown. So again, this might be one of those, hey, all right, we're going to, before I pull this boss or this rare, we're going to wait 30 seconds to let brand's cooldown come up. So I have a mini heroism for the start of this fight that we're about to go into, right? Only the team leader will be able to modify brand with these powers. Other players will receive a buff for themselves. Also adding improved rewards to the treasure wraith encounter. We understood there's an aversion to trying this encounter with the high risk of death. There will be a special wraith power that will drop to increase players' maximum health in addition to another existing power. Our goal with these changes is to push the amount of power received from vignettes and treasure powers to help create a more of a decision moment of whether or not you would like to risk to get these abilities. So yeah, I think it's great that they're looking at that stuff. But again, that's why I talk about like this will take some adjustment, because you might bounce back to a 4 and you're like, man, 4s are really hard, but you're used to skipping all of the vignettes and treasure powers.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you did
and
your
so,
season 1 behavior.
Exactly.
Like, well, that's not worth it.
Yeah. So now you're like, oh, wait a second. Actually, they've buffed all of this stuff. Let me try this. And you kill that rare, and suddenly you get this huge power. You get 60% more crit chance for the rest of the dungeon from a shard of arrowhead. You're like, dude, that's what I want, right? Like that would be wicked. So that might be the difference maker.
Silencing potion on brand sounds really good too, especially like, I have that kind of defense and disruption minded, approach to gameplay anyway. So that seems really fun to have. I do feel like they were a little, again, conservative with kind of the power design for like the limited powers you find inside delves in season 1. And I think, that might be, it might be just to get a feel for how players approached it and what was really needed for the mode. Now maybe they have some more ideas of, what they can sort of get away with in the space or where they can push it to. I think also, I don't know if the developers feel this, but the players certainly have some, Torghast related psychic damage around these kinds of like limited time, like instance based powers. And so, I think you want to design the mode that stands on its own 2 feet without it revolving around collecting these suites of powers, right? But also, if the powers aren't cool, then we don't want them. So we need some cool powers. I definitely would never go out of my way to acquire anything, any of these limited powers from treasures or from the vignette. Like if I saw Reno in my delve, I'm just going the other way. Like it's just a waste of time, So I think there's definitely opportunity there because it does add variety and it could be cool, but the payoff was just never good enough. So if the payoff's going to be better, then we'll check it out. And that could, especially if we're going to be in a world where, hey man, if you're a high end delver, then you want to be doing, at least 3 11s for the week on top of your other rotation because you got to get your 11s in for your gildeds. Then man, you might need to. Maybe it doesn't matter specifically which powers you have, but you are going to want to take advantage of wherever you can get them because you're going to need it to push through the 11s. Like I could see that, and that might really actually be cool. That might add that sort of, a top end challenge and texture to the mode that I kind of lamented how like I was doing delves just for the gear and I wasn't really enjoying them. by late season this season. And that was pretty true. That might mitigate some of that, because, I understand that this is like a pinnacle challenge. I'm getting gilded crests for it. I'm getting very high level rewards. It's very challenging, but I have a pretty broad decision space inside the delve. I have I have some texture around, I can take on this extra challenge, but then I get this huge benefit that actually feels impactful on completing the rest of the delve. It could round out that top end play in a way that I think, there's definitely some opportunity coming out of season 1 to investigate there.
Yeah. Okay. War Within development notes. So this is PTR development notes about stuff that came out. They've done some significant changes to the drive system, in other words, the car, where they increase the height of the G99 breakneck so you can climb over obstacles easier, such as fences, not getting hung up on as many things. They added a bunch of different variety of horns that you can customize. I'm really looking forward to seeing what some of those are. They reduced the maximum speed of the GNZ Airmaster 9000. Essentially, it went down to 12.5%, but its acceleration at high speeds has been increased to compensate. There's a lot of things they did just to sort of tweak these cars to make sure they feel really good. So there's a lot of testing happening with those, which is good to see. So I'm looking forward to that.
Please give me like a Murloc horn.
That's
I want like a Murgle horn. I don't know. It'd be ridiculous, but why not? Like it isn't the whole thing here seems ridiculous. So let's go. If we unlockable horns would be awesome.
I want to have a long lost discovered tape of a Hans and Franz talk show that took place. That's what I want to have happen.
Oh man,
they can play on my radio.
Have like a radio, yeah.
I want radio shows. I want some like cheesy radio shows that I can have in there playing. That would be great. That would make me very happy. All right, as far as delves go inside PTR, they have added in a vendor, the Zandelvari is what they went with. Zandelvari is located in the Delver's headquarters in Dornegal, and you can get coffer keys, brand curios, brand level ups, teleports to any delve, and teleport to any capital city. So you can do all that from Zandelvari inside Dornegal. And then, Jason, there was one Prot Warrior PTR feedback note that you had expressed to me, basically outlines everyone's dislikes, but does not provide any solutions.
That's sort of what I walked away from it with. And if you'll indulge me, we try not to get too much into like, this post or this piece of information really only applies to, 1/36 of the player base or whatever, or 1/13 of the player base or what have you. But, Prot Warrior is obviously near and dear to my heart. It's the only thing I've ever really mained in any kind of like end game or whatever in many years of playing the game. And it's contentious right now because they're doing some stuff on PTR that is not shaping up too great, And so I outlined some of the issues that I was seeing coming down, the pipe here with this PTR. And I talked about it on the show, I think last week or maybe the week before. And we got a post from Kyvax this week. There was somebody made a huge feedback post that was pretty good about some issues, the issues with some of these changes and everything. And, Kyvax kind of laid out what they're trying to change conceptually. And I mean, I agree with the points. And the weird thing is we're sort of at this crossroads of like, well, where do we go from here? Kyvax mentions the high APM requirement, and he says they feel the APM requirement is too high, which I might agree with. And he says that, high APM can be uncomfortable or even painful for some players. It's true. I mean, you could easily get RSIs and stuff from using a mouse and keyboard. And, like I've said before, most of the time playing Prot Warrior, if you're actively tanking, dude, you're hitting two keys per GCD at least, right? Because you have a bunch of stuff that's off GCD. You're proccing a bunch of shield slams, and you got to weave all those in on GCD, and then you're using, your shield block and ignore pain and off GCD, and then you're thunderclapping, and you have all these other things proccing. So it's a very high APM play style for sure, and that's okay. That's not like a bad thing on its surface, but I do think, like, obviously, like Kyvax here is sort of identifying there's sort of an upper level that the devs don't like, and I do think that that's reasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable from a dev standpoint to go, hey, should we like peel back some of the APM requirements of Prot Warrior? I probably think that they should. Well, he goes into saying that high burst rage generation is one of the problems that spikes this APM. And he says this is what's driven the changes we've made, cutting down on burst rage generation. What they're really talking about there, I think, is Shield Slam primarily, because the big change that they made, and the big overall problem coming in is that Strategist is being changed, which, Strategist you may remember from back in the day is Sword and Board, which is the thing that gives you a chance to proc a Shield Slam, with no cooldown. It's been 30%, and they're cutting it to 20%. And that doesn't sound like a big number change, but it's actually nerfing it. You're getting, a third fewer Shield Slams in any window of time. And it's your primary ability offensively, and it's an important ability defensively and throughput-wise. I think of all of the problems that a lot of Prot Warrior mains have maybe identified with the direction that we're moving in, I don't think anybody is like, hey, we're shield slamming too much. We like to shield slam, right? It's part of what's fun about playing the spec. So I don't know. I feel like, digging their heels in about 20% is maybe just wrong, because I'm not really sure that that's what players want and like, and I'm not sure if they can offset that many fewer shield slams with tuning. But, I think that's sort of the challenge they've presented to themselves. Kyvex makes the point in the post that, okay, if you have fewer shield slams available, then you should be able to revenge more, and you should be able to execute more, especially with the sudden death procs, because that's another thing. You can have so many procs with Prot Warrior, right? Which is all sort of this APM problem too. So, the sort of the sales pitch here is like, okay, you're going to shield slam a lot less, but what if you had more time to think about using revenge or something? And it's like, okay, like theoretically, I guess that sort of makes sense. We're just going to reduce the amount of shield slams that we're using keystrokes on, and we're going to leave some more room for revenges or sudden deaths. I feel like if that's the case, that maybe revenge needs a little more juice than what it's had. I mean, especially for Mountain Thane, it's like you have so much access to Thunderclap, and then you get Thunder Blast procking, and it's, that's sort of one of the whole main things that you're doing in this. I don't want to push revenge if I don't absolutely have to, right? It's almost like a last resort for me. I feel like a lot of times in a world where we have Thunder Blast and Thunderclap being so heavily modified by Mountain Thane, which is so much fun to play, I don't want to not push Thunderclap either, right? He mentions that they're monitoring performance, they're monitoring ignore pain tuning and total damage. The rage income changes affect other talents like anger management, and they're working to keep all aspects of protection competitive following these changes. Yes, I mean, that is your job, is to not make this spec fall off the face of the earth. I think part of the problem is that another thing that is weird here in terms of like Prot Warrior is a very reactive feeling spec. You want to feel like you are this really expert like melee fighter, right? You're defending yourself. You're kind of out dueling the thing that you're fighting, because you can protect yourself and you can strike them sort of opportunistically, right? When you're using your shield kind of like as a battering ram to open up these other opportunities. That's like what really feels cool about playing the spec. The predominant build and style is with a talent called Devastator, which means you no longer use Devastate as an active ability. Your auto attacks just provide the Devastate effect and have a chance to proc shield slams. That ends up feeling a bit passive. There's this weird tension where, yes, you don't want super high APM and the super high APM requirement playstyle, but if we're not using that filler Devastate, the rhythm feels really weird if we don't have other buttons to push, right? We also don't want dead GCDs, especially like a tank spec. It feels weird to have dead GCDs. You want to be doing something, either to protect yourself, to, I don't know, protect an ally, to harm your opponent, whatever it is. The dead GCD feels really weird. We've never had it really in any. I mean, I don't know. Maybe in Burning Crusade or something, but it doesn't even feel. I don't even think we had it then. You want to push. You want to be pushing a button every GCD. So I think trying to put more emphasis on like rage generation from some other talents, like there's some talents that proc rage generation from your bleed effects and stuff. Like, okay, that's a way to have like a more consistent rage thing. You know, some players have pointed out that, well, rage from damage taken is a big part of the problem here, because the answer is always just to pull more stuff and then you get more rage. But it kind of makes sense in a way, but rage from damage taken does have an internal cooldown on it. So there is like, you might think in your mind, like, well, I'll just pull more stuff and I'll get more rage. But there is like an upper limit of how much of that you're really going to get from getting auto attacked. So it's a tricky situation because they created a spec that's super fun to play, but just has this mega high APM requirement, right? You don't want to burn people out or like literally have people injuring themselves playing it. But how do you do that without cutting all the fun of the spec and the power of it off at the knees? And the thing about this post, like I saw a post came out like, oh, sweet, we got some blue text about Prot Warrior in 11.1. I walked away with it just with nothing. There's no solution here. There's no roadmap. It's just like, yeah, you're going to have fewer shield slams and you're going to generate less rage. Okay. But the community is saying, hey, we don't like these changes. They feel bad. We're concerned the spec's not going to be competitive. And like, yes, some of us even agree that the APM requirements are too high, but these changes go too far. And the answer is like, well, we're making these changes because we believe that the consistent sources of rage generation and the lower shield slam reset rate will be good enough. Not really what I was hoping for, I guess. Like we have seen some tuning changes and stuff come through on PTR that will offset a bit of this, but I think it's a tough spot they put themselves in. And I really think that they should just resign themselves to the 30% proc rate on strategists for the shield slam resets and balance everything else around that. I think players are just too used to it. We've had it that way for so long. And dialing that back, it fundamentally changes what the spec even feels like to play and the rhythm of kind of how I find Prot Warrior tanking to be a very kind of rhythmic type of play style. And slowing down those shield slam procs really throws that off. So I don't really understand why this was such a priority for them for this upcoming patch in terms of kind of reworking Prot Warrior, but I don't know. I guess the good thing is like they're obviously aware of it. They're receiving a lot of feedback and some of it from what I've seen seems to be quality. It's like it's in line with some of the same things that I've been thinking about since we saw the initial wave of changes. So I mean, hopefully, I think there is some kind of happy medium, but I really think the biggest thing is that strategist nerf to 20% is that just throws off the whole play style too much. We need to figure out a world where we can calm everything else down while also shield slamming a lot, and maybe that means like bigger ignore pain absorbs, just you got to be careful with that. We've seen what happens when ignore pain gets out of control, but maybe we need to let ignore pain a little bit more off the leash even than they already are planning on. Maybe we need either adjust all the rage costs across the board and just like tune some numbers around so you can fit more stuff in, or just make the talent that increases the size of the rage pool, increase it by more so that then you have more time to make decisions or something. I mean, there might be some other options versus just, well, you're going to shield slam less and your rage gen is just going to be overall less and everything is less, but we'll offset the tuning slightly, so we'll see how it shapes up. I remember like talking about it on the show. My initial reaction was like, I'm not going to doom and gloom it, but this really doesn't seem good. And it's gotten a little bit better, but I think they're still setting us up for a rough, patch launch here.
I hear you, and I think we're still far enough out that there's a lot of feedback still happening. We saw massive changes to the Druid talent tree over this past build update that they did for PTR, so I think there's still... I mean, Randy's just conveying what the developers have passed on to him to convey in a lot of these situations. So we're just seeing essentially a back and forth conversation happening, and I'm sure Randy will take the massive amount of feedback that they received from their post and we'll go back to the developers and go, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what people are expressing they want. And hopefully that's listened to and more changes come through. So we'll see what happens in the future with that. But with that, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons. We've hit that time of the show where I really want to be sure that I thank our patrons for the contributions they make to our show. It helps us to improve on the content we create and continue to keep those archives and whatnot online. And today I'm giving a special shout out to Alianas, Arajian, Bradley, Dustin, James, Kapawi, Cobra, Max, Shorel, and Rager. Thank you so much for all that you give towards our show, as well as all of our patrons, both past and present. We really appreciate all of you who contribute to the Patreon to help support the show and keep everything running over here and keep the lights on. And if you're looking for our Patreon, you can find it over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. There's no new patrons this week, but thank you again to all of our patrons.
Absolutely. Thank you, patrons, for everything you've contributed to the show, past and present. It means a lot and helps keep the show in production, helps keep all the archives online, and keeps the show accessible. I mean, man, we hear so often about people finding the show newly, and then digging into old episodes and stuff. And all that stuff has been made possible over the years by our patrons. So thank you so much for helping us out and keeping the show going and helping us make the best show we possibly can.
Yeah. All right. With that, another great way to support the show is by leaving us those 5-star reviews. You go on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, and leave us those 5 stars. They really help raise our show up the charts and keep it popular in there. And we still need to find some sort of software to track our reviews better. So we're working on that. But yes,
we do not have a current solution for international reviews. I can only easily find the reviews in the United States. So we had a few of those in the last couple episodes, but ones outside of the US are much harder for me to look up right now. But keep them coming. We'll get them at some point. It's just, as we mentioned a while back, last month, the service that we had been using went offline and they merged with another service, and it's all paid now, and it's a whole different landscape. So it used to be simple to get all those international reviews in one place from anywhere they were left. It's not now. So we'll dig through them at some point once we can get back into them. So keep them coming.
Yeah. That's going to wrap up episode 668 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter at The Starting Zone or Blue Sky, The Starting Zone at blue.bluesky.com or thestartingzone.com/Discord. You can join our Discord server. If you want to just go to thestartingzone.com, there is a Discord button as well to make that easy for you to find and hop in and join the conversation over there. If you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, we have a store set up over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. And you can check out all the designs on shirts and mugs and stickers and all that kind of fun stuff. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me you can find me on Twitter over at Shieldwald, or you can find me on Blue Sky. It's jlucas.bsky.social over there. Like I usually mention, I do read both sites, and I keep up with them both, but I mostly post stuff on Blue Sky these days. So if you want to see what I'm up to and what's on my mind, Blue Sky is probably your venue. Video channels are over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. Still quiet, still kind of hibernating as we're in this sort of downtime. We'll start spinning it back up a bit more as we get into patch and season 2. Be streaming raids and keystones and stuff, so come check those out as well.
All right, and if you're trying to find me, you can find me over on Twitter at Spencer_Downey or over on Blue Sky at SpencerHD.bluesky.social, or you can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/SpencerHD, youtube.com/@SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.